Hey there skirmishers, it's Luke from Skirmish Miniature Gaming, and I'm just going to cover a podcast today for you. It's episode 2. We're going to be talking about a mixture of things. We're going to be talking about Kill Team and the current status of it in general, so like the expansions that we've had and how it's holding up and is it worth getting into, etc. with the new starter box that's come out. So we'll be having a discussion on that. I've got Alan coming on for a discussion about Monsters and Mercenaries, because we've just released the Monsters and Mercenaries content at the beginning of this week, and this is just going to be a talk between me and Alan on first impressions and first thoughts on Warcry, so there'll be that as well, so keep in touch for that. And then aside from that, it's just going to be general discussion from me, and I'm going to give you obviously that little bit of tidbit of silly information at the end of the vid, which you can stick around for at the end. And if you want to sign up to support these podcast vids and the extra content that you can get on Patreon, you can sign up in the top right hand corner on the information icon. Support us as a channel, and obviously you'll get access to all the extra content that's out, including Monsters and Mercenaries at the moment, which we've got extra vids up for. But otherwise, let's get into this episode 2. So let's get into this. Let's discuss the current status of Warhammer 40k Kill Team. So Kill Team as it stands, obviously you've got something like maybe 5-6 expansions, 3 of which I would suggest to keep. You've got the new starter set because Games Workshop released the original starter set, which they clearly realised was overpriced, considering that people were buying them, splitting the content because there was a lot of terrain for the value of the set, and selling it individually, and they were earning way more than probably Games Workshop were selling it individually. So what they've done is they took that off the shelf, they've re-released with less terrain and different factions just so that other people might buy it, and it's different terrain but it's actually less for the value. And I would say models probably as well. I think it's Tau and Blood Angels now, or at least Adeptus anyway, Adeptus dies. So is the new box set or starter terrain set worth it? Probably not really, but then if you want, it's good that we've now got a starter set again for Kill Team, because if you want to introduce new players into it, or if new players want to get involved in it, they actually have that starter set there, because we went for a while where nobody could access the game very well. So I think at least we've got that back now. Where is Kill Team going? That's hard to say. I would have thought they'll carry on supporting it. Obviously, we know we've got Sisters of Battle coming at the end of the year. It wouldn't surprise me if they did an expansion including those and maybe another faction to add into Kill Team, like as an expansion. And that would not surprise me at all, and I'll definitely be onto that myself. Sisters of Battle, cannot wait for that. Otherwise, yes, expansions that we've had so far. If you're new to Kill Team, I'm going to make it a little easier for you. So you've got the core rulebook, the core set, which is core manual, which is all you need to play normal Kill Team. Following behind that, the next expansion I would suggest to get as like a core thing, like I would definitely suggest having it to be able to play Kill Team. You don't have to have it, but I would say in terms of massive like rule changes and like specific rules for your Kill Team that change up the game and generally just make it better and add more options for your Kill Team, as in like units to take, that is the Elites expansion. So core manual and the Elites manual, I would suggest getting base. Like those are the only 2 I would suggest you definitely get, really. Core manual if you really don't want the extra one, but to be honest, Elites literally just adds more models for your Kill Team to take. There's no other restrictions there. I think it ups the points limit to 125 points, but that's about it. It just means you can throw more models in. And it also adds faction specific, like faction-wide abilities, basically, like you'd get in full 40k, because we didn't have that in the core manual, and that is why I would suggest getting those 2, just to be able to play Kill Team. That's what makes Kill Team the best it can be, in my opinion. If you want to add more on a campaign level and you want to go up to the 200 point mark, you can get the Commanders expansion. This adds, so you take the points limit up to 200 and you take a hero, basically. You take that commander, so like a Space Marine Captain or a Necron Overlord or an Autarch for the Eldar, for example. So that in my opinion is great if you want to play bigger games and you like to play with those strong, like ridiculous commander models, or I would say if you're a narrative player, definitely get commanders, because you can add those command models into a campaign scenario. But if you're not a narrative player and you're a match play based, I wouldn't really pick this one up if you're not that interested. It's still fun for match play, don't get me wrong, but they're quite overpowered a lot of the time. Psychic especially can be very one-sided. So I would suggest if you just want match play and narrative without narrative, stick to the first two. But otherwise, add in commanders if you just want more. If you're happy to if you want like the full kill team package and you want everything you can possibly play to add to the game, that adds to the game, definitely get commanders. The other one, I'd say those three are the only ones in my personal opinion I'd bother really picking up for kill team. We had Rogue Traders that was released, which pretty much just brought in close confine rules, which is what Arena also brings in, so I'll discuss Arena in a moment. So that kind of invalidates Rogue Trader in my opinion. The only thing it did do was added in Rogue Trader faction and the Jellipox Infected. If you want to play either of these two factions, pick up that box set. If you don't bother with it. It does not really add anything to the game otherwise. Then you move on to Arena. Arena is just like a close confines competitive play box set for kill team. I really enjoy Arena, to be fair. More or less, it uses the same rules as kill team, but you're in close confines, so you're fighting in like hallways and doorways and things like that, opening, closing doorways, and it's like fighting on the hallways of a ship or like corridors of like a military base or something. It's completely different to normal kill team in my opinion. You use most of the same rules, but it's got a completely different feel to it. It's very, very fast paced. If you want to play a quicker version of kill team, Arena's definitely the thing to go for. You can get a game of Arena done in half an hour, to be honest, if you're on it and you know what you're doing. Very simple. So pick up Arena if you want to play that close competitive natured game as well. Obviously, like I say, if you're a narrative player, you can then play these close confines battles as well as the normal ones. Other than that, you don't have to get Arena. That's why I would say stick to those core 2 books that I originally said. But if you want that different way of playing it, pick up Arena. Maybe you want the core manual and the Arena manual so that you can just play Arena. The one thing I will say is with any of these expansion books, you need the core manual anyway. So yeah, if you're playing Arena, I'd probably say Arena, core manual and Elites as a base, to be honest. But Elites does just throw in this extra stuff, but I kind of feel that it is very core now, to be honest, and I would say to pick it up. You don't have to. It's not a law thing that you now have to use Elites. You can just use the core manual, but Elites, I don't see why you wouldn't want it. It just throws in that extra abilities and adds a lot more to the game. Makes it a better game in my opinion. But yeah, that is pretty much that. That was just a quick discussion of where kill team's at. In my opinion, what do I think of where it's going, as in is it dropping? I think since they got rid of the starter set, it's definitely dropped in terms of attention and people getting into it and people dropping out of it because people have just gotten bored of it really. But I think there is still quite a big community out there for sure, because it's 40k essentially. You can just drop your own models in and play 40k kill team as opposed to full size 40k. And you've kind of got the option then if you want to play one or the other. The new starter set, since it's come out, I think it's generated a bit more interest again. And like I say, it'll be interesting to see how they support it going forward, because we haven't had since Elites, I don't think, I could be wrong, we haven't really had any support for kill team aside from that new starter set coming out. So we'll have to see how it goes. We'll have to see how people stay involved with it. We'll still cover 40k each week. It's just our version of covering full 40k because we're a skirmish channel. It's still, one thing I would say is I'm not any more against kill team than I was when it first started out. The only thing that I don't like about how they do things is how they release these different separate expansions, because now it's so hard and mind-boggling for any new kill team player that wants to get involved. I think it's just, they've made it a lot harder to get new players involved. And it's going to probably lead the same way with Warcry. I hate to say it, because Warcry's, they've got the kill team involved and development team involved with Warcry, so they're probably going to have the same sort of release schedule of these different expansions that'll add to the game. Take my word for that, it'll definitely happen, which is a shame, but there we go. Other than that, there's nothing really more to say about Kill Team at the moment. I'm still enjoying it. If you want to get into Kill Team, definitely do. I advise it. It's one of my favourite game systems for skirmish. There are certainly things that could be tweaked with it. I think it could be slightly simplified in some areas, like flesh wounding and morale, the way morale works and things like that. I'm not keen on. Like broken is just breaking tests. I just do not like. And some of the ways the abilities work can be a bit overpowered, but otherwise I love the system. I think it works really well. Whereas Warcry, I think Warcry can be slightly too simple and could have that little bit more attention in some areas. But I like both for those different reasons. I don't really like one more than the other, to be honest. I prefer the Age of Sigmar lore and universe at the moment than I do to 40k, but yeah, because 40k, the lore, I just think Games Workshop loves Space Marines a little too much, and they might as well be just releasing Horus Heresy Mark II because they just don't support the Xenos factions as much, and I think there's so much potential there for 40k, the 40k universe that they don't use, and that disappoints me a bit with the lore there, but that's my opinion. Everybody has a different one. Going on then, that is the 40k discussion and how that's going. We'll go on now, I think, to some Warcry. Obviously, like I said, I'm going to get Alan on now in a moment so we can have a chat about what we think about monsters and mercenaries. So we'll go over to that and let us know what you think, guys, about the 40k section. Leave comments for us, etc. But we'll go on and chat about some monsters and mercenaries. Right then, so I'm here with Alan. We're going to just have a bit of a chat then about monsters and mercenaries. We've actually just on the same
First
day.
impressions.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Like, it's literally what this is going to be called, like first thoughts, first impressions. Not exactly a review, but you can take it as that if you like. So we've already played a decent bit, and I've played a bit more allies as well than Al has. But we've just played our 2 games with Gloomspite, and you used Untamed Beasts.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgon and Arachnarok Spider. I used the Gobblepalooza, Boggle-Eye for allies, and you used
Great Bray Shaman.
Great Bray Shaman for the allies. I've already had another game this last week, which is already up. We had a couple of games. It was Nighthaunt, Stormcast, and I'm trying to remember the other.
Tomb Kings.
Tomb Kings. So like Legions of the Gash, yeah. So we had a good mix again in those games. We used tons of different allies. Like Knight of Shrouds was really cool. Actually, wound back time and like used an ability to like heal himself. That was pretty awesome. So what we're going to do is just give you kind of first impressions of allies. So I've got the book open here as well. I'm actually on the monster page at the moment, but so allies in general, there are a lot of options. Obviously, you've got options for pretty much every warband that's currently out. The other thing I will mention actually is that you can actually, if you just wanted to agree between yourself and your opponent, you've also got tons, pretty much a whole page just dedicated to Slaves to Darkness. Here we go, I've got them here. You might be able to just about see that there. So page, if you've got your books by now, 43. They're called the Varangard Retinue. So essentially when you go through campaigns and things, you get to essentially employ Varangard because you're getting more what would you call it? Basically the Everchosen seeing how well you're doing and he's sending these Varangard over to support your warband is essentially what it is, and they start to join you once they realise how much you're progressing, which makes sense for a campaign. But there are 6 options for Slaves to Darkness. They're all fairly expensive, but if you wanted to agree with your opponent so that they can use their own warband of Slaves to Darkness, you could just use those, like an Everchosen warband. It'd be quite elite-y, but they have 6 of their own abilities. So one thing I will say is if you do have Slaves to Darkness models and you want to use them as a warband and agree with your opponent, go for it, because I mean they've literally got their own page with their own fighters and their own abilities, so I definitely recommend trying out that, and I'd love to do it on the channel as well if we can get hold of some Slaves to Darkness. But yeah, so allies, what your thoughts on allies are? Because we've only had one game with allies, but you were saying...
I like them a lot because you can kind of pick the ally that you feel...
suits your...
Yeah, like for my Untamed Beast, the Great Bray Shaman, as soon as I saw him, I didn't know what his abilities were, but I thought he fits with my image of how the warband works and what they're like. But there's so many of them that you could have totally different allies with the same warband, just depending on how you paint or play or conceive of your warband.
On that note, I've definitely seen tons of models, even warbands that I don't have, thinking that would work so well. Thinking of different conversions you could do, especially because obviously you've got to bear in mind that a lot of the allies in here are just generally chaos. So any of the chaos warbands that have been released can pick any of those chaos models. So I mean, take a chaos sorcerer, you could easily convert a chaos sorcerer into any of those factions. So imagine taking a chaos sorcerer, putting tons of snakes all over his body, and you could take that for the Splendid Fang. That's something I've thought of doing. That would be really cool.
It's just another level of personalisation to your band, isn't
definitely. And I think that's what the edge they're going for, isn't it? Really, GW.
And they seem to be if you go through the book and you look at the stats, they're not. There's none that make you go, well, everyone's going to take that, because they're pretty
varied. There's a good choice.
They're pretty evenly matched throughout.
That makes me think as well. Actually, Iron Golems was the other one I took. Forgot to mention Iron Golems. They're personally my favourite Chaos Warband at the moment, and one of my favourite warbands in the game. I just love their that Iron Region kind of feel to them. Kind of crossed with Khorne, I suppose, which is why obviously the Khorne models for allies fit straight into Iron Golems. I think I had the Skull Grinder or Crusher.
Skull Grinder, yeah.
And he's a really cool model. So, and it was actually you Al, that mentioned it to me over Messenger. As soon as we saw them release the models, we were like, yes, that is damn right on Iron Golems. That is. Yeah. And so I got him, painted him up ready for the first game for pre-release. And yeah, I mean, there are so many options. I mean, you've got here, there's 5 options for Chaos. Then you've got Khorne options, which any of the Chaos can take as well. You've got another 6. You've got 5 Disciples of Tzeentch, which I think any Chaos band can take as well. So, I mean,
they'd fit quite nicely with
certain ones.
Yeah,
you've got the
Cypher Lords.
Cypher Lords, they're very Tzeentch, very spy, is their kind of lore, as they're essentially spies for Chaos and the Ever-Chosen. 2 Skaven models. I would like to see personally an actual Skaven warband. I think Skaven would suit this game down to the ground.
Yeah.
You got 2 Nurgle options. The only thing I think about Nurgle, I'm not sure who they slide into really. I think a lot of people have been saying that. But like I say, conversions again. You could fit them into anything. Stormcast, a lot of options. They've got 6, which you'd expect from GW. It's like their Space Marines. Yeah. So
if you were really into Nurgle, you could customize your Iron Golems to be corrupt and
that's
Nurgly.
true. That's very I'll bang on that.
There's so many conversion things you could do.
Definitely. And I think one thing we're certainly discovering, especially with the monsters, which we'll discuss in a second, is very more campaign focused is what they're going for, I think, rather than that competitive edge. Don't get me wrong, Warcry still definitely will, I think, have a competitive thing to it, but I think more sort of going towards that campaign narrative direction, I feel, because I think this campaign we're going to run in October, which if you haven't heard already, we're going to run a campaign for Warcry in October, and we're going to include monsters and mercenaries in that, and Al's probably going to be running Bone Splitters throughout that each week. You can sign up to the Patreon to get access to all of the campaign to get ready for that. But otherwise, for allies, essentially you get one choice for an ally each time you play with your warband, and you just add that into the total of 1,000 points. Most allies are around the price of a cheap leader option, so about 120 to 150 points.
Yeah, I mean, my Great Bray was 165.
Yeah, some of the much bigger models like Stormcast are just the similar price to your other Stormcast models. So it is I mean, if you really wanted to, at the end of the day, it's so narrative based anyway, Warcry, that you could just say between you and your opponent, let's each take 2 or 3 allies. They're not really any different, to be honest, to them.
In campaign, you can take 1 ally for every controlled territory.
Yeah.
So you could just say, if you weren't playing a campaign, you could say, okay, let's pretend that we're halfway through a campaign and we've each got 2 allies or whatever.
I mean, I haven't looked too much into the campaign rules yet, but I think basically you if you capture monsters and allies, you can add them to your warband, but you don't necessarily pick them in your roster each time. So I'm pretty sure you still can only pick 1 ally each time you fight, but you have a choice in your warband essentially. I think you have like a max of 20 models in your warband at any time, but then you only select 1,000 points worth for that battle. And then I think each territory you gain, you get extra 100 points in each battle or something like that, which makes sense. But when we start going through the campaign, we might do a separate vid like this just for campaign, I think, once we get our impressions on that. But match play, I think they just added more choice of models, so I recommend it. There's nothing, I mean, the only initial worry I had about this was that they were releasing DLC too soon, you know what I mean? Like extra content, like an expansion, I thought it was too soon. But now that we've kind of looked at it, all it does is really adds more options. It doesn't change any rules or anything. So I think that being said, there's no harm in it. There's no harm at all. And if you play your opponent doesn't have the expansion, it changes nothing. You can still take 1 ally and your opponent can just run a normal warband. So that's great. That means, and that's how they've been doing Warcry so far. You can get an expansion, or you can have certain models that your opponent doesn't have, and it doesn't necessarily matter. You can just play the game and it doesn't affect anything. So I think that's great. That encourages individuals to buy even more, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, Destruction Grots have a lot of options. You can use each of the Gobblepaloozas, which is quite funny. I've only used 1 so far, which was the Boggle-Eye. They seem quite daft to use. They're quite cheap as well for allies. We'll have to try out your Iron Jaws as well, possibly. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, we'll go on just now then to discuss about monsters. I want to keep this fairly tight, to be honest. So if you haven't already watched the games that we've just had today, technically, because this will come out afterwards, do go and watch those first. We'll try not to spoil it as much as we can, because you might want to watch this just for impressions and maybe not watch the battle reports. But the first game, let's just say it was fairly one-sided almost, based on the monsters. Like I say, go and watch it and you'll see what we mean. The second game that we had up on Patreon for our members, you can go and watch that if you sign up to be a member, was pretty awesome, to be fair. That game was, we got to grips with the rules, and we'll just go through that now. Because essentially in the first game, because we didn't really, to be honest, I don't think, get to grips very quickly with the output, that the damage that these monsters can deal. Like, they are insane.
It's a bit of a surprise.
Yeah. The Ragnarok Spider's quad ability, being able to give a monster an extra attack with a quad is very strong. It's pretty. They are very thematic, don't get me wrong. Like, a lot of the abilities are pretty awesome. And we saw that with your Gorgon in the last one, I think, as well. But the other thing we figured out in the second game, and one thing that I'd definitely say to you all for advice when you first throw in these monsters, definitely don't underestimate the power of the monster hunter abilities as well. Because we went into the first fight just being like, oh, let's just go all in with the monsters. There's no way we can beat the monsters. They've got too much health. They're too strong. But the second game, it definitely, we worked out that the monsters are definitely killable. Yeah, essentially, like the monster hunter abilities, for example.
It's quite good the way that they get weaker as you chisel them down.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into that more as well. So yeah, like Al says, when we realised you can put more damage into the monsters, they do get pretty weak, to be honest. Like, they don't hit, well, they still hit the same, but they can't really
move as far.
Yeah. So if you manage to use one of these monster hunting abilities, for example, I used the triple for Gutting Strike, just to give you an example. So if you play Warcry, you'll know how good this actually is. You can only hit a monster with it, but you add a double the value of the ability on your dice for
double.
And this is a triple. So if you have a triple 6, for example, you double that to a 12, and then for each critical hit over the activation that you roll, you add 12 to each hit. And there's no arguing with this one. It's not like the Gloomspite Git squad, where you wonder whether it's each hit and crit. It actually says each critical hit in this. So if you get lucky with a couple of crits, that's already... Let's say my squig does 4 critical damage. 4 critical damage, I'm pretty sure. Add 12 to each crit, so that's already 16 damage for a single crit, and he's got 8 attacks over a full activation, and it lasts the whole activation. So that just gives you a good idea. Most monsters are like 50 to 55 kind of wounds, HP. You're already taking with 1 or 2 attack actions most of the health off a monster, so it is very, very doable, and I will really put my foot down on that. Don't underestimate it. Definitely go into your game. If your monster goes down within a couple of rounds, don't be afraid to get some of your guys up in the monster's face and use some of these abilities, and save your dice for these abilities, because you will die otherwise if you don't. In my opinion, like, you will just slowly grind away at the monster, and your monster, the way the monsters work, just for those of you that haven't played or are going to play, you get 3 activations over a whole round, and in each activation you have 1 action. So usually with a guy you'd have 1 activation each turn, and you'd have 2 actions for that activation. But monsters, 3 activations, 1 action in each. So overall they get another action, but it means that if you run away from a monster, they can't move and attack you unless you have an ability that allows them to do extra. Because I think you can use an ability before and after that 1 action in each activation. So that's the best way I can sum that up. And that's why we figured out that when you cripple a monster and get that movement down on them, you can easily stay away from them, and you can easily start to use abilities to actually full on take it down.
I think, because I only got my book 10 minutes before we started the game, and I didn't really look as deep as I should have done at the monster hunting abilities, so I was using my standard, my untamed and my universal abilities the whole time. But when you clicked on to using the monster hunter abilities, I must admit, I turned my head and I went, hang on, I need to get my head around those. They're definitely worth looking at.
Yeah, I think it's just that classic thing of like, just try it. But all I'm going to say is I'll warn you about it, just because if you're going to take this nice big monster that you've just worked really hard to paint up, you've spent a lot of money on it, you're going to take it to the club and maybe only play 1 game for an evening, definitely vary the abilities that you're using. So don't just go all in with your monster and not think about it too much. Definitely look through all of these abilities before you go into it, because you'll be surprised how quickly your monster dies if you don't click onto it, basically. But yeah, I think, other than that, I think it's going to take a few more goes with these monsters for us to get a full idea on it. But just from an initial, first thoughts, I do like it. I think it's a good addition, but it is very narrative. It's very narrative based. Like, if you do just a general monster mashup game, it can go very one-sided. I mean, if you look at these abilities beforehand, before you go into it and you get to grips with it, I think it's much better, and you'll have a better experience.
The second game was much closer.
Oh, it was an awesome second game. I really enjoyed that second game, actually. The monsters that we specifically used, obviously we haven't used all of them, they do all look fairly similar. Like, the abilities are very thematic, but they're all strength-wise quite similar, I think, to be honest. I mean, aside from that, like, obviously when we go into this narrative campaign for October, I think that'll be really interesting to see monsters inside a campaign run. And one thing I can't wait for, actually, is to do one of these side quests where, especially with Bone Splitters, considering like their lore as well, because they actually genuinely are monster hunters. To see a side quest where you just hunt a monster and use these monster hunter abilities, I think that'll be awesome. So I can't wait for that. So if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and get ready for that, and obviously sign up for the membership as well, so that you can get all of the games. And I can't wait to see how that goes. But I mean, we've been through the majority here. The universal abilities for the monsters, you have separate universal abilities to the ones you get in the actual Warcry. So you can't use your faction abilities, and the same goes for allies as well. You can't use specific faction-specific abilities, which makes a lot of sense. But they've given you a lot of extra abilities in here just for the monsters, which, like I say, just don't ignore them, really. Just use them as much as you can if you're playing monsters. Make sure you're spending your ability dice on those abilities rather than maybe your faction-specific ones most of the time. I think you'll get good results. But let us know what you guys think. Have you been playing Monsters and Mercenaries? Have you managed to get a game in yet? What are your thoughts on it? Do you agree with me and Alan? Has this kind of helped you going into your first game, like giving you a bit of that warning about how things are going to go? Obviously, we've only played with 2 of the monsters so far, and we've only had a couple of games with them. I've had quite a few games now with the allies, Allies, like I say, they don't add any other mechanics really to the game. Obviously, they've got their own abilities, but they just give you more options. So I see no downside for Allies, to be honest. If you're going to get Monsters and Mercenaries, definitely do it. Even if you just want to go for the Allies.
My initial feeling is that I would think that we'd probably use Allies every match, but we wouldn't necessarily want to use monsters every match.
Yeah, basically. And like I was saying before, like, you know, if one of us took one of us didn't fancy taking one for the roster, that doesn't matter, go for it.
Yeah, because you pay the points.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. No, I couldn't recommend it enough for that, to be honest. And the monsters, obviously it's a lot of money to £15 buck and then buy a big monster just to be able to play monsters, but I would say if you've got a mate or you've got a club and you're playing a campaign run, I'd advise it. But if you just wanted to do match play, I wouldn't, to be honest. I don't know about you. Yeah. I mean, you could throw monsters against each other, just in general, but I think you'll get bored of it quite quickly, to be honest, if you just throw them against each other, even with like different objectives included and things.
It changes the sort of the dynamic of because you've got this giant thing that you've got to worry about, and are you going to engage it? Are you going to run away from it, try and pepper it from afar? It does alter the kind of, I mean, as you were saying, we did it as a straight up kill mission, but it'd be crazy with objectives. And say you had one where there was just one objective in the centre, you dump your monster on it.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Ragnarok spider there. You know, that's the pace. Whack that on an objective in the middle of that.
Getting that off. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And but this is what I mean. Like, I think that's why they are designed for narrative, because you've got these just specific games where you hunt the monster. There's no objective other than hunt the monster, kill it for experience probably, or tame it and add it to your warband roster. But we'll see how it goes when we get into the campaign. And I'll look forward to that. To be fair, I think it'll mix it up quite a bit. I'm gonna try my best to put a really good narrative spin and some cinematics into the vids as well, so I hope it ends up being good quality and whatnot, and you all enjoy watching that. But otherwise, thanks Alan for stopping by just to have a bit more of a chat for you guys.
Always a pleasure.
So that was mine and Alan's discussion about Monsters and Mercenaries expansion and just about a bit of Warcry in general, and just to give you guys a bit of an idea of what you're getting into and if it's worth purchasing, if it's not. In my opinion, if you're a narrative player, definitely get this expansion. If you're a match play player, if you like the look of the allies and you like the idea of that, pick it up, why not? It's £15, and probably less than that if you got it from elsewhere, but £15. It's probably about $20 in the US, I'm guessing. So it's not too much, I don't think. But yeah, aside from that, obviously we've had a chat about Kill Team. We've talked about some Warcry. Malifaux 3rd edition. Now, Malifaux 3rd, I've been enjoying. I'm not going to go into massive discussion today about it. I might do that in the next video. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. We're going to be releasing more content for 3rd. That's going to be coming. It's just a matter of getting the players involved. It's not like Games Workshop games where lots of people have the models and you can just get people in to play a specific game. Just a bit of a discussion as to where else we're going with the channel. We've got Core Space coming, but a lot of other things keep getting in the way. We've got Wild West Exodus on the way. We've got Batman miniature game on the way. I've got a Bane crew getting built. Wild West Exodus hoping to get the Firefly crew because I love Firefly. Throw a like on the video if you love Firefly. Brown coats, throw a like on that video. For the Resistance. I'll end by just giving you that little bit of tidbit of information I always like to give, just a bit of a fun fact. If you're not too into Warhammer, or maybe you don't look too much into the lore, a lot of people probably do know this, but the Orks, how the Orks work in 40k, and I'm pretty sure they're the same in the world of Sigmar as well. Basically, Orks are so crazy and awesome lore-wise in 40k, or in Warhammer in general, because their beliefs actually make things come to reality. So essentially, if you get enough Orks in one place thinking strongly enough about the same thing, it can actually come to fruition. So if you've got like hundreds of Orks in one area and they're all thinking, oh, I wish this army of whatever would just vanish, or we'd just defeat them instantly, it could happen. Like, that's just how Orc lore works, and I just find it hilarious. They are really, it's very, very orky. It's the true warg. But otherwise, I suppose you could say The other thing that used to be part of the lore, I think it still is, if you've got a group of orcs inside a vehicle thinking strongly about the same thing, like I say, they can develop almost like a psychic shielding around themselves, and this essentially protects them from most things, sort of like an invulnerable save. So sometimes you get a group of orcs on like an artillery gun or a piece of weaponry or inside a orc vehicle, and if they're thinking strongly enough together, they can create like a psychic dome or shield around that vehicle, which I think is hilarious as well. But that's just your little tidbit of information today for Warhammer. In the future, we might do some bits for other things. It might not be daft information. It might just be a bit of fun information that you might not have known about Malifaux, for instance. But yeah, that'll be it for today. Thanks for watching the podcast, guys. Stay cool, skirmishers, and happy skirmishing.